All right, so I'm glad you guys are here today. And we started this, and so some of you are here because you know, and some of you just came and thought we were just doing our normal Wednesday nights. And so just to kind of give us a little bit of background here, this Veracity series that we started. We started actually last month, and really the last Wednesday of each month, we will do this series. And the word veracity means it's a pursuit of truth. Okay, and that's where we got the name Veracity. And hopefully, we as Christians believe that we find truth in the Bible. So the Bible's our guide. So what we're trying to do really is use some kind of pressing social issues and look at them from a biblical perspective. It's kind of heightened now as we are in a time of election, and some of these things become more present just because of the time that we're in. Some issues that we'll talk about will be maybe more controversial than others, some a little bit more black and white. But our goal, and we didn't necessarily last month achieve part of the goal. I thought last month was good when we talked about abortion. The goal is at the conclusion, as we get to the end, that we have some time to just have some kind of discussion, some kind of Q&A, some talk about the particular topic. Now, I'm going to be up front honestly, but I'm not going to necessarily have all the answers. And so I do want us to have some of those conversations. So when we get to the end here, and if there's something you'd like to share, maybe you have a question, an insight, something you want to add to it, by all means. But tonight, I think, is one of those issues that is sensitive and it is controversial. I think it's one of those issues that we've seen a seismic shift in the culture that we live in relation to the view of this. And so I kind of titled it the idea of a discussion on same-sex marriage, but really in this kind of vacuum, we're addressing same-sex homosexuality and really to a certain extent this kind of transgender movement. And so really it's kind of a wide vacuum. And the reality is this, it's 6:45, our goal is to be done by 7, so I don't get in trouble. And we cannot, 7:30, we cannot cover this topic in 45 minutes. We can't really cover it in we have a full hour. We could spend several weeks on this issue. And so, one of the things I've said from the very beginning as we talk about these things, that I'm very, very holding to is this, that where the Bible speaks, where we find truth, we have to stand firm behind it. Okay? But we have to do it in a loving and graceful way. I think that this subject is not new. Okay? Same-sex, homosexuality as a whole. It's not a new subject. It's not like we just began to see this idea. As you'll see in your paper there, after you guys get through that first page, there's 5 or 6 pages back to back where the Bible talks about homosexuality, sexual sins, and things of that nature. One of the traps that we kind of find a little bit today is people will say that the Bible doesn't talk about this, that Jesus doesn't talk about it. And so I felt it important for us to go. We're not going to go through all those verses. Some of this is meant for you to take home, read, digest, think about, pray about. Parents at the back, why yours is different. There's about 3 different sections in there about how you can approach some of these subjects with your children. Now, some of your children are here. Some of your children are downstairs. And unfortunately, as we talk about this, 10 years ago I may have said our youth shouldn't be maybe part of this discussion, but But they face this to a greater level than I think we as adults do. And so because of that, I wish as I would say some of these things, it would be completely foreign to them, and they would think, why? But they could probably share more with us and enlighten us to a certain level. So we've chosen to encourage them to be part of this. Now, all that said, I'm going to pray, and we're going to try and look at this subject, all right? Lord, we thank you for this day. We thank you for all the things you've done for us, God. Thank you just for your word, the Bible. And I thank you for the truth that it holds. And Lord, I'm thankful that it's not just this book that's outdated. It's not a book that isn't relative to where we are today, but it's truth. It's truth that endures. It's truth that was given to us by you, our Creator. And so, Lord, I pray as we talk about this, as we look at this, as we just try and maybe briefly begin to engage in these conversations, that you just help us to have a spirit of grace, a spirit of love. Lord, I pray you convict us, help us to stand strong and firm where you want us to stand strong and firm. Lord, help us to hold on to your word, and white knuckles and all, Lord, and help us to grasp it, to understand it, and live by it, and learn by it. Lord, we're just so thankful that you've given it to us. So in these times, in these days when there is so much uncertainty, in these days when it seems so chaotic and so twisted, Lord, may we grab a hold of you even tighter. Lord, we love you. We thank you for all the things that you've done for us. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen. All right, so if you guys have your Bibles, we're going to go back to the very first book in the Bible. The very first book. It's in Genesis, okay? The very first. So if you have a Bible, there's a couple in the back if you want one. We didn't bring one. But here, so this is what, as we kind of look at this, you might be thinking, okay, so why are we going to read about Adam and Eve when we're talking about this particular subject? And what I think is so important for us to understand is when we look at that, and you look at those first two chapters really of Genesis, you see this amazing picture of creation. Okay, and God created all these different things. And I think one of the most attacked things in all the Bible comes down to this very beginning of the Bible. And here's what's important to us is if we don't believe and hold firm to the first two chapters of Genesis, then the rest of the book means nothing. Okay? And one of the things that's so important for us is we don't have the right to pick and choose what we think works for us when it comes to the Bible. And so we're going to go back here to Genesis. Genesis chapter 2. In Genesis chapter 2, verses 18 through 25, we really begin to see this ordination, this structure, this foundation of marriage. Okay? And so let me read this. Genesis chapter 2, 18. And then the Lord God said, "It is not good that man should be alone. I will make him a helper fit for him." Now out of the ground the Lord God had formed every beast of the field and every bird of the heavens and brought them to the man to see what he would call them. And whatever the man called every living creature, that was its name. The man gave names to all the livestock and to the birds of the heavens and to every beast of the field. But for Adam there was not found a helper fit for him. So the Lord God caused a deep sleep to come upon the man. And while he fell asleep, he took one of his ribs and closed up its place with flesh. And the rib that the Lord God had taken from the man he made into a woman and brought her to the man. Then the man said, "This at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. She shall be called woman, because she was taken out of man. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed." And so you have this picture, and what's so interesting as you read through it, if you were to begin in Genesis chapter 1 and read this point, is you consider those 7 days of creation. Every time God done with something, he would step back, he would look, and he would say, this is good. Okay? It's day one, boom. This is good. This is good. This is good. Until we get to Genesis chapter 2, verse 18. And then we see there where the first time in Scripture, God stepped back and he said, this is not good. Okay, and what he's doing is he's stepping back and he's looking and he's created most of creation. He's created Adam. And he looks back at Adam and what he's saying is Adam's not imperfect. But what he's saying is Adam's incomplete. Okay? And so in order for Adam to grasp this, because Adam has no idea. Right? So what happens is God has all these animals go in front of Adam. And it's Adam's job to name each of these animals. So they each go by him. And as Adam's doing this, he's noticing something. He's noticing the differences. He's noticing that each of these animals have these mates, but he's different. And none of these animals can match up, can meet up with him. And so, God causes this large sleep, great sleep to go over Adam. And God, as he does that, he takes a rib out of Adam and he begins to create woman. And in that passage there, when he says, and this at last is bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, she shall be called woman because she is taken out of man. The Hebrew word there for man is ish. And the Hebrew word for woman is isha. Okay, out of man. And so what happens is God creates this perfect helpmate for Adam. And in there, we see this, and their marriage begins, and he begins to tell them, and this is where again, you see this, right? And some will say, well, there's just the two of them, right? Well, God goes out and gives them direction. Because at this point in time, Adam and Eve have no mother and father, do they? Right? I mean, they're other than that, have no father, right? But they say here, he goes, therefore a man shall leave his father and his mother and hold fast to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. And the man and his wife were both naked and were not ashamed. And so those few simple words, what God is saying is, listen, you man, you woman, you'll eventually leave your husband, or you'll leave your mom and your dad, you become one flesh. Okay, and that idea of one flesh, teens, if you want to snicker a little bit, you can, but that is referencing sex. Okay? You go back a chapter in the beginning, or in Genesis chapter 1, God goes and tells creation to go, be fruitful and multiply. Okay, and so you see this design, this structure for marriage, right? One man, one woman. Okay, and God created us. Now in the society we live today, this idea of same-sex marriage and really this homosexual movement becomes this idea of equality. And one of the things that becomes fuzzy is how they begin to look at, and they've taken it really to a civil rights movement. Okay? But in this, what we have to understand is this. God created man in his own image. Okay? We all tracking there? We believe that? We understand? We read that before? God created us in his own image. Man and female alike. Okay? So we are male, female. We are equal in God's eyes. Okay? So there's really no, for going back here to the garden and for the rest of eternity, for all of eternity, there is just no superiority between either or. We are all equal in God's eyes. But, this is what's important. We're not all identical. Okay? And that's the issue that we begin to wrestle with now. Okay? God made us male and female. He constructed us special. Right? And when he talks about this idea of marriage of one man and one woman coming together, one flesh, one marriage, one lifetime. This is what's amazing. So we see this picture here in the very beginning of the Bible. Okay? Of marriage. And it's set up. It's the way it's created. Right? We can make jokes. God did not make Adam and Steve right? Or whatever the other jokes are, God made Adam and Eve. Okay? If God were to have ordained that lifestyle to be okay, then He would have formed us in a way in which all the functions of marriage could take place. And He didn't. But this is what's so important, because some of us, and I fear this a little bit within church as a whole. I don't fear it, I know this, because we've seen this tidal wave of change to where many, if not most, mainline denominations now have come to the point where they support same-sex marriage. And some maybe even here are thinking, what's the big deal? We think what we want to think, they think what they want to think. Don't do it. Okay, marriage was instituted in the Bible by God. And the big deal is this. So in the beginning, we see this formation, right? Well, if you go over into the New Testament, okay, to the book of Ephesians. Okay, so flip if you have a Bible, let's go to Ephesians chapter 5. Ephesians chapter 5. Paul, who we met this past Sunday, as we were talking about in the book of Acts here, is writing Ephesians. Ephesians chapter 5, and if you look at verses 22 through 33, and maybe your Bible was in a column or above and had the subtitle as Wives and Husbands, but this is what's so important, okay? So if you have your Bibles, read this. If you don't, listen, okay? Because as we read this, we see this is much bigger than just a husband and a wife. This is much bigger than just a regular whatever marriage, okay? This is what it says. It says, wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. This would not be politically correct to say today, right? It's a different subject for a different time. Wives, submit to your husbands as to the Lord. But the husband is the head of the wife. Okay, now we're even getting worse, okay? So wives are supposed to submit. The husband's the head of the wife, right? Even as Christ, this is what's important. So if you have a Bible, I would underline this. Even as Christ is head of the church, His body, and is Himself its Savior. Now as the church submits to Christ, so also wives should submit in everything to their husbands. Husbands, love your wives as Christ loved the church and gave Himself up for her, that He might sanctify her, having cleansed her by the washing of water with the word, so that He might present the church to Himself in splendor, without spot or wrinkle or any such thing, that He might be the holy and without blemish. In the same way, husbands should love their wives as their own bodies. He who loves his wife loves himself, for no one ever hated his own flesh, but nourishes and cherishes it, just as Christ does the church, because we are members of His body. Therefore, a man shall leave his father and mother, and hold fast to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh. The mystery is profound, and I'm saying that it refers to Christ and the church. However, each one of you love his wife as himself, and let the wife see that she is respected by her husband. So when you see this picture, we understand why God holds so firm to the institution of marriage. I mean, this is much bigger than just whatever we see. God in the very beginning, in the book of Genesis, plays it. He sets the rules. He sets it up. And then we see it played out here in Ephesians. Why it's so important. Because this picture of marriage is a picture of Christ in us. Okay? In Christ, like in that whole passage, we read it like husbands are head of the house, but it's not like we're there to just domineer, be the boss. But we're there to protect, provide, to love, and to cherish. Wives play their part as well. You see, there's this constant strife. Well, if we were to go back into the book of Genesis, to Genesis chapter 3, right? When we read earlier, we talked about this marriage where Adam falls asleep, he wakes up missing a rib, but boom, there's this hot wife. Right? I'm assuming she was probably pretty attractive. And everything is good, everything's rosy, right? Well, things change. You get into the next chapter, and God had laid these rules out. These rules were laid out even before Eve was created. That Adam had like free reign. He could do anything, everything basically in that garden except eat from one tree. It's just a pretty nice gig if you think about it, right? I mean, you have total reign of a beautiful, I don't think there's ever been a place like the Garden of Eden on earth since. You can do whatever, you can have whatever you want. I mean, it's all except for one thing. And like most of us today, when you tell us we can do anything but have this one thing, we're all drawn to that one thing, right? And you know what's incredible about God? And sometimes when we consider issues like this, we think of these as negatives. You guys understand this? Like whenever God gives us a negative, it's followed with two positives. That God is protecting us, and He's bringing us to something even better. Okay? And so in the Garden of Eden, He's saying, listen, you don't want this. You don't want what this tree has to offer. You're better off trusting in me. Well, Eve has a friend that comes slithering across, the snake. And the snake begins to kind of pester Eve, right? And say, listen, do you want to eat of this? You should go have an apple or whatever the fruit was. And she kind of balks at first. She says, no, I can't. God said he couldn't. And then one of the greatest lies, a lie that is used today, Satan goes, did God really say that? So even though we consider this idea of this homosexuality, people would say, well, did God really say that we love each other? Did God really? Isn't God about love? Did He really? Is it really in the Bible? And so Eve falls and sins. And the byproduct of that sin, the Bible tells us that work is going to become much more intense for Adam. Right? I mean, he's got to work much, much harder. The land's going to be more thorny. And for Eve, God said, well, your reward for sin is childbirth is going to be much more painful. And sometimes we think that's the only thing, but there's also this other part. God said there's also going to be this strife now because you're going to want to hold the position above your husband. There's going to be this strife now that you're going to have a hard time supporting him. And so you see this struggle. And that struggle is playing out. Now, here's the hard part. As we go through this, as we consider this idea, and right now you're saying, okay, Chad, you've talked about Adam and Eve, you've talked about Ephesians 5, we're talking about marriage. How does this really play with same-sex marriage? How does this really play out with homosexuality? How does this really play out with this transgender deal? Well, listen, if we, as I said at the very beginning, if we don't accept Genesis chapter 2, we don't accept creation, then how do we accept God? I mean, God's the creator, right? And so if we get away from Him, if we push Him aside, then really what we're saying is, well, I'm really my own created person. I'll do what I want to do. I'll go through, and there might be some things in the Bible that I'll choose to accept because it sounds good, it may work out in the end. But we're still playing the role of God. And there's passages, honestly, I'm not going to read them, they're recorded there, where God is crystal clear on His view of homosexuality. Okay? I mean, read Romans chapter 1, 26 and 27. Right here, when after Adam and Eve, after God creates Eve, He goes through and He looks at this creation. Instead of it saying it's good, God says, this is very good. You go over, I believe it's Leviticus chapter 17, verse 3, when there's this discussion of what's going on, and he mentions this act of homosexuality, and he calls it despicable, detestable. It's a big difference between very good and detestable. Okay, so the Bible uses very firm, strong language. And some will say, well, Jesus never taught about homosexuality. And again, I think we have to be careful on that. I'll say two things to that. One, I'll say that's incorrect. In Matthew chapter 19, the very beginning of that passage, they're trying to set Jesus up. They're trying to set this trap, the Pharisees are, with Jesus on divorce. And they ask him this question. And Jesus goes back and he refers to Genesis chapter 2. And in his reply, he states exactly what Genesis chapter 2 says about one man and one woman becoming one flesh. And what God has joined together, no man can take apart. And so I believe right there, like God is stamping and saying, listen, this is marriage. In God's eyes, in my eyes, this is the institution of marriage. One man, one woman, one lifetime. Yeah. But some will say, well, that's in reference to divorce, and really never specifically spoke about it. I would say that that's a very slippery slope. Because in essence what you're saying is that God didn't speak specifically about something and he must have endorsed it. You would have a hard time reading the Bible and finding something in the scriptures about crystal meth or cocaine. Okay? But I would hope that we can all agree that God would say, that's not good. And what we see is we read from Genesis all the way to the end of the Bible, we see this continual discussion about sexual sins. And that's really where it comes down to. And some people will say, well, what about the people who were born that way? And for the longest time, I think the church would say, no, there's no way you're not born that way. Listen, here's what I would say about this. When Adam and Eve sinned, sin entered the world. Right? Can we agree with that? Anybody disagree? Okay. And sin was passed on from generation to generation. I believe, according to Scripture, the act of homosexuality is a sin. Can someone be born that way? I would say it's possible. That doesn't mean just because you're born that way, you act that way. Okay? When I said earlier that this has turned into this civil rights campaign in which they want to try and compare this to this racial division in the country a long back, and really, quite honestly, it's kind of refestered. There's a breakdown, I think, in that argument, because when we start talking about skin color, that's someone is born that way, right? And you have no choice in the matter. Is that correct? Like if you're born white like I was, I mean, that's your skin color. That's the way it is. You're born with your color hair, I mean, unless you're dyeing it or whatever, and your eye color. You know, if you're born with those are things. Those are traits. Those are things that you have no control over. I can't act it out, right? I can't act out being white or black or Hispanic or Chinese, right? But when it comes to sex, it is 100% a choice across the board. Okay? Whether you are homosexual or heterosexual, it is a choice. Okay? An absolute choice. We all choose that. We all decide that. Okay? Now, one of the things I think the church has struggled with is we are really good about pointing fingers against that sin, and we want to ignore the other sexual sins in the church. Just because we're heterosexual and not homosexual doesn't make us this golden child that does no wrong. One of the scary things I think we begin to see as why this is wrong, why as we begin to see this accepted in society is the fabric of the family, the fabric of marriage begins to deteriorate. And it's my belief as we begin to see this stuff roll out, just as this whole ramp up against this in this same-sex marriage has occurred, we've seen this quick onslaught in this transgender revolution occurring. And I will tell you, as you begin to see this, you already begin to see legislation coming in saying, well, if this is okay, then what about this? What about polygamy? What about having multiple wives and husbands, or whatever the case may be? And this moral fiber breaks down. And what we do is we begin to see that we become desensitized to this stuff and we become much more agreeable to it. And we can look at statistics. Folks, I mean, I've got a binder up here of, I don't even know how many pages, of statistics and quotes and from religious people and non-religious people. And you look just in a 10-year span from 2003 to 2013, in almost every denomination, you saw a trend, a change from strongly opposing to almost agreeing with. I mean, society as a whole, like those of faith, they say those of faith, that's a very broad term, okay? That's basically if you go to church, visit a church, have thought about church. Okay, they say those of faith in the United States today, 58% agree with same-sex marriage. The country as a whole, you take those out of faith, those who don't identify with anything, it's over 80%. See, the tide has changed significantly. So what do we do? What do we do as a faith family? What do we do as Christians? Is it one of these subjects and topics that we just say, you know what? They do their thing, I'll do my thing. Does it make any difference? Yes?
Share something.
Sure. Can we hold that for a couple minutes to the end?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, absolutely. We'll definitely come to that. I'm trying to wrap this up in like 5 minutes here. The final part of this is this. Sometimes if we deal specifically with this idea of homosexuality, we think that the end goal is to cause or make that person heterosexual. Like if we do that, then we've achieved, we've corrected the wrong. Here's the reality. I think we are incorrectly trying to address the situation. The ultimate goal is holiness. Okay? The ultimate goal is holiness. I read an article, a story of somebody sharing this where this Christian dad, a deacon in a church, found out that his son was struggling with these same-sex attraction, and so he thought his best answer was to get his son a prescription to Playboy, as if that would change him. But that's not. See, that's the part of the problem is and this goes across the board. This goes with sin entirely. Okay? I mean, listen to me crystal clear. If we don't deal with the root, it will never change. And the root for all of us, the root we all strive to get is to be holy. Okay? And if we just try and figure out ways to avoid it, we just try and put them in different circumstances, then all it will create is frustration. And it won't solve anything. So we have that. I think we're approaching wrong. I think we have this, that for so often, for so long, it's just yell, you're wrong, you're evil, you're bad, whatever. But we have to get to the point where we love. Right? I tried to talk about this, I believe it was this past Sunday. We talked about Paul. We have to love people. Like genuine, true love. Okay? Here's the deal. Truth and love go hand in hand. Okay? Truth and love go hand in hand. There's no way. Like, if you're not going to be truthful with somebody, then you ultimately don't truly love that person. Right? With our children, we do that, moms and dads with our children. When we discipline our children, right? We are doing it because we love them, correct? Sometimes we're frustrated, but mostly it's because we love them. Right? That's why we do it. Okay? And so what's important is, as we stand in truth, okay, for us to step back and just say, well, I believe this, but I'm not going to say anything. What you're really saying is you don't really love those people. Yeah, because we're hiding from the truth. Guys, we live in a day and age of mass confusion. Mass confusion. Like you guys are in the thick of it. I mean, absolute thick of it. I mean, your heads have to be spinning. There's no way, almost every TV show you watch today has a character that lives that way. They make them funny and innocent, and it desensitizes us. It makes us think it's cute. It's popular more than likely in your school. I've already heard stories about the whole bathroom situations. Folks, this isn't an issue that one day will come upon us. It is here. And for us to ignore it, for us to just continue to be quiet about it, we'll do no good. Now listen, here's the deal. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. And this is a topic that is one in which I can talk in grace and love. Because me, probably like almost everyone here, has had an impact in my own personal life with this. As a child, as a kid, I would say the uncle that I adored the most, the one that I loved the most, the one that meant the most to me, was gay. Now, this is a long time ago, guys. I'm an old man now. But I remember, I didn't fully know it when I was a kid. I remember, I guess I was in elementary, probably 3rd, 4th grade. That my uncle lived out in California and was sick and had to come back, move in with my grandparents. And that uncle of mine had AIDS. This was in the 80s. I didn't fully know what it was. My parents talked to us as kids about it. They shared as they told us what it was. They didn't tell us how we got it. They didn't necessarily tell us how it's lifestyle. But listen, I, over the next several months, watched this uncle that I loved waste away in nothing. And one of the last times I remember going into this room in a hospital bed, he was almost a vegetable. I still love my Uncle Steve. He made a very poor choice in life. And so when I consider this subject, I have firsthand experience with it. And yelling at somebody and putting their fingers in and telling them they're wrong, they're sick, they're evil, they're going to hell will not be what God uses to change. We need to love these people. We need to love them like Christ loved us. Romans 3:23 says that we've all sinned. Okay, that's it. I mean, guys, understand this. We are all on a level playing field. All of us. It doesn't matter what your sin is. We are all sinners. But God loved us so much that He sent His Son to die for us. 2 Corinthians. I'll put my paper on the page. First Corinthians chapter 6, verse 15 says that God raised the Lord and will also raise us up by His power. 2 Corinthians 5:21 says God made Him who had no sin to be sin for us, all of us, so that in Him we might become the righteousness of God. What that tells me is this: there's hope for all of us. There's hope for those who struggle with same-sex attractions. There's hope for those who struggle with their gender identity. There's hope for us in our marriages. There's hope for us as high school students, middle school students. There's hope. And that hope comes in Jesus. Okay, so, Ms. Lane, why don't you share with us?
Yeah, I want to, first of all, I have two uncles. I'm happy to say that one of them went into the church, and he was in the church, and never acted like this. I mean, he was very nice about it. He had one kind of conservative guy. the year, I can tell you. But that's not what I need to share with you. In 2012, I applied for both Columbia and Princeton, and I was accepted. So I went, and when you apply, guys, to schools, when you go, what you do is ask about them as much as they're asking about you. I was accepted for both, so I went to Princeton, Theological Seminary, sat in classes and did whatever, and knew right away it was not a place I could stay. The Presbyterian Church, USA, of which I've been a member since I was there at 18, has taken on literally as a banner the celebration of homosexuality to the point of not only authorizing marriages, but also consecrating ministry. And I supported it. I cannot stay. So I went to a movement in Columbia, which I perceived to be different, and it turned out it was not different. And I was patronized for my conservative views and ended up moving to seminary. I ended up at Liberty, and I now have a degree in Liberty, and I'm happy, thank God. But what I'm concerned about, and what we all have to be concerned about, is that vision that too many people see of the established church is that the established church is in fact just turning a blind eye to the real content of the Genesis Bible. And I'm disturbed about it, and I remain disturbed about it. And I don't know that leaving was the solution, but I know that I was so unhappy. I prayed, finally just didn't know what else to do. And it's still an unresolved issue.
Sure,
And
sure.
I find it incomprehensible that they go about their theological business.
And I think that's what, when we talk about, that's why it's so important that we as a church continue to always use the Bible as our foundation, okay? Because as soon as we absolve ourselves from the Bible, then we begin to pick and choose what we want and how we want our church to be. And the reality is this: most denominations are choosing to accept with the idea that we don't want to make enemies or whatever. And so, as I said, I think it was 2013 when the Episcopal Church ordained their first homosexual bishop, and I think 2014 was when the Presbyterian USA as a whole adopted and changed their policy and so on. And guys, it wasn't even really a close vote. I read about this week. I think it was 429 people voted in favor of it, and less than 100 voted against it.
In the General Assembly,
Yeah.
as a matter of fact, of those that voted against almost every single church is not really accepted.
Yeah. It's just so we know too, just for those who are, you have Presbyterians, you have a PCA group and a USA group, okay? The PCA group is typically more conservative now, and the USA group is the one that's kind of broken. Sure, and I meet with next door on Wednesdays. Typically, I meet with pastors in town, and Jim Gravatas is the pastor of the Vietnam Methodist, and he was saying this summer the Methodists are voting to determine what their churches, and he told me quite honestly that he's fearful of it. So, what else? Does anybody else have any thoughts, questions, concerns? And obviously, we probably have lots of concerns. Anybody? Yes. Sure. I would say this, that sin is sin, but different sins carry different consequences. And so yeah, does that make sense? I mean, in God's eyes, sin is sin, but again, different sins carry different consequences. And again, that consequences can go in a lot of ways, okay? When we consider this deal, I mean, a lot of us, when we think of the homosexuality, we think of consequences, we go to like HIV, we go to AIDS and those kind of things. But then also you look statistically in that lifestyle and how empty it is and how they're striving now for marriage and rights and that kind of stuff. But I think as most of them find that they don't necessarily believe in monogamy in relationships, and statistics play that out. So.
The other issue is adoption. Children in those marriages. And there are claims as well as studies that show, minor studies that show that the children of those issues, those marriages are apparently normal and sociologically, statistically no different from the others. But I can tell you as an instructor, that is simply not true. It is visible.
Yeah.
It's something you can see almost immediately.
And I think, most of us hopefully understand and realize that we have to always be careful when we look at statistics. Because you can make statistics, right?
Absolutely.
Any argument. Yeah. So, what else? Anybody else have any thoughts? Yes, let me see.
Okay, so there's like this group at our school that makes it like known that they like believe in like that and that they like are a part of that. And so they almost make it kind of like a rivalry, like we hate you and you hate us. So like as like we like get older and like get more people, like how do we like let them know that like yes we believe this, but yes we still love you. Like it's not that like we can't be friends.
I think it's easier said than done. Unfortunately, there is great resistance right now and a tremendous amount of hostility. And again, I would say this, you go back and say, listen, I think we as Christians, church as a whole, there have been times that we've thrown fuel on the fire. Now, what was done in the past was done in the past. We can't undo the past. The reality is this is where we live now. And so, again, as I said this, I think we have to be firm in truth. And what's important about that is this, like we need to stand firm about what the Bible says, right? So, first thing is this, we need to know what the Bible says. Right? We can't stand firm on the Bible if we don't know what the Bible says. Okay, so we gotta read, we gotta learn, we gotta study the Bible. Okay? So we gotta know the Bible and be from that. But we have to do it with love. And we talk about this in evangelism. Like when you go and you share your faith with somebody, the reality is you're going to have probably more have a much greater impact by sharing it with someone you have a relationship with, a friendship with, someone you've invested in, versus going and knocking on a door to an absolute stranger, right? And so I think for us, part of that goes to that same deal. Like as you begin to have relationships with people, as you get to have friends with them or have class with them or whatever else, I think that you just have to be able to show them first. And I think part of it's conversation, open conversation, where you ask, you talk, you whatever, and work through some of that stuff, you know. Hitting them upside the head with the Bible right off the bat is not probably going to work. But it will be a slow process. You know, and you have to really love that, and they're going to test that love to see if it's genuine, if it's true, if it's legitimate. You know, and we as a church can do that. I mean, folks, if we had a couple show up here tonight for this, you know, what would we have done? Yeah.
And then
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not a matter of us, we don't want to encourage sin to continue, but we also be careful that, you know, we got to disciple too and show them Christ's love. And we can't expect them to have all the rules in place and know everything they need to do before we let them into our group. So it's a tightrope. Who else has something? Anybody else have a thought, a comment, something they'd like to share?
Well, and I think a key is the sanctity of marriage that we've lost or we're losing, you know.
Yeah.
Traditional, like whatever you call it, traditional marriage, and that how important it is that we glorify and sanctify that.
Yeah. And here's the deal too. Again, when we look at marriage, we have to understand and grab a hold of the biblical form of marriage. And what twisted today is this: the banner in which the different movements operate is using that term love, right? Love. Okay. Youth, like, I understand, like, you guys aren't married, so you have no idea what marriage is like, okay? One day you might. Some of you guys have boyfriend, girlfriends now, and you love that. That's good. But what you will find in marriage is that love is an emotion to a certain extent, but ultimately it needs to become a choice. And in marriage, you'll find there'll be times when you hit those hard times, and you may not love your spouse, but that's not all right to resolve. And again, this whole conversation, folks, we can look at it from so many perspectives, and it can be deflected by so many different arguments about divorce and everything else and other sexual sins. But again, here's the deal. To me, homosexuality falls into the camp as a sexual sin. It's like pornography, sex outside of marriage, those kind of things. And so, what else? Anybody else have any thoughts, comments?
I was just gonna say for you guys, and I think you're all in middle school, high school, right? Things change, like as you get older, talking to people about things that you believe, but you don't have to make someone else believe what you believe. You share it with them, and then you pray and hope that God changes their heart, because that's where the Holy Spirit comes in. In my field, I have never worked with so many homosexuals than I do right now. But they know who I am, and they know where I stand on that, and I love every one of them. I would not pick one over the other. They know I don't want to hear about their outside life. But whenever they talk to me, I had one bring me a letter from someone that he hadn't talked to in almost 20 years, sent him a very ugly letter about how he shouldn't go to church. He's not a Christian because he likes men. And so I brought up scripture and let him read it for himself, and he moved away, so I'll never know really what happened to him. But the seed was there. I didn't need to fight him. I didn't need to scream and yell at him. There didn't need to be, us against them. And when I was in high school, I don't know if that would have been in the same spot. But so knowing, these verses and saying, well, this is me and this is you, and that's okay. Because this will not be the only thing that you will experience in high school and middle school. But know what you know and pray for them, because that's all you can do, and hope that they see that there's something different about you. So, and it's a hard, I wouldn't want to get in high school and middle school right now.
We don't want to do it twice.
But here's the truth, and Jesus tells us in the Bible, if they hate me, they're going to hate you. At the end of the day, that's the one thing. None of us like to be disliked, right? We all like to pat on the back, we all like to be liked, but the reality is this. We shouldn't expect anything different than what happened to Jesus to happen to us if we're going to follow him. Okay, and so there will be rough patches. There will be times when it's not cool. It's not whatever. And we're going to be the oddball. Listen, this is after the Supreme Court made this decision. Justice Alito made this quote. And I mean, this is again as we consider to wrap this up. He said this. I assume that those who cling to old beliefs will be able to whisper their thoughts in the recesses of their homes. But if they repeat those views in public, they will risk being labeled as bigots and treated as such by governments, employers, and schools. And that's the reality. And so, this is why it's so important, and part of the reason why we do this, or doing this, is we want to try and help build a biblical worldview. At the end of the day, this is what Veracity is. It's an attempt for us to help build and construct a biblical worldview. Okay, last month we talked about the sanctity of life. We talked about abortion. This month we tried limitedly to be able to talk about this idea of sexuality, same-sex marriage, of homosexuality, transgender, that kind of bubble. Okay, these are important. These are our important issues. We live in in the greatest country in the world. One of the things that makes us great is we have a voice. We have an ability to engage. Youth, some of you haven't gotten to that point yet where you can show up and vote. But for the rest of us adults, we do have that opportunity. And we can sit back and we can complain about the way America is. And there's a lot to complain about. Okay? But we can also engage and get involved. And to sit back and be silent, in my opinion, is no longer an option. And it's our responsibility. It's a right, but it's a responsibility that we as Christians have to be involved in this. And we're very quickly approaching the primary in our state. I think it's the beginning of March, right? 15. Okay? And so I've told you guys, I'm not going to come up here on a Wednesday night, I'm not going to come here on a Sunday morning and tell you this is who you need to vote for. I'm not going to do that. I want us to look at these views, and I want you guys to look through those candidates and find those people who best line up with the Bible says. For me, if I have options, I personally cannot vote for someone who endorses abortion or endorses same-sex marriage. I can't do that. To me, I think there's too much at stake. You need to wrestle with that. Use the Bible. At the back, on those back pews, we have two different voter guides. One's a little bit prettier than the other one. But as I've come across different voter guides, I will try to make those available for you. One is a bipartisan, meaning it's not Republican or Democrat. Back there, it kind of lists up the candidates on the Republicans and the Democrat side. A few issues, I think it was 5 or 6. Another one was from a website. It was like Christian Vote or something like that. But as I looked at it, I don't think they had any Democrats represented. So take that for what. Okay. But anyways, I'm going to pray for us, and then the back pew, right back there, they're there for your education. And then again, parents, adults on the back there, in that booklet, there's a couple of sections on how to deal with and have some of these conversations with your children about some of these things. There's also a book, there's a section, but I think the first chapter, whatever, but if this is something that you're interested in the topic, I would encourage, these are 2 good books. Kevin DeYoung wrote his book that says, What Does the Bible Really Teach About Homosexuality? It's a very good book. In that printout, the first chapter, I think, is there, which deals with family, which is so critical. And then one of the books that we're kind of using, I'm using as one of my main resources, a book called Counterculture by David Platt. And it has a chapter on marriage and a chapter on sexuality, but it talks about a lot of different issues. So, anyways. All right, let's pray. Lord, thank you this day, thank you for all these men for us. Thank you for dying across for sins. God, I thank you for your mercy and your love. Lord, I'm thankful that even though we are all born sinners, we are all undeserving, you love us enough to send your Son. Lord, as we consider this subject and the subjects to come, and these are sensitive issues, and although we may believe there's a black and white stance biblically on it, our engagement in it is difficult and not always clear. So Lord, I ask that you give us wisdom as we try to navigate subjects like this. Lord, I do pray, God, that you help us to stand firm on the Bible. Lord, help that to be our foundation. Lord, help it. God, I pray that you protect us from trying to be people who pick and choose things that feel good or feel right to us. God, you are the creator. We're the creation. You have every right to make the rules. Lord, I pray that you just help us and help us to lovingly and graciously engage. Lord, I pray that we be this process our country is in, we're going through right now, an election year. God, as we have debate after debate, and we see all the commercials, and we see all the interviews, and Lord, so much is being said, so much blood is already being slung. Lord, I pray that you just help us. Give us wisdom and discernment. Help us to find individuals who believe in you, that believe in your word, that use your Bible as their compass. But that genuinely, not just They don't just say things to just try and get some votes from the church and the Christians. That was to find those genuine people who have records that show what they believe. Lord, we just ask that that your hand is in this, and Lord, that we know that you're in control, and we know that you've already chosen somebody. And so we just ask for that. Pray be with us as a church, give us safety as we leave. Thank you for giving us safety last night in the midst of the storms. Pray be with those in the other communities who were struck hard. Many, many different homes were destroyed. We just ask them specifically of those families. So your son's name we pray. Amen. All right, guys, have a great day.